Welcome back, everyone. We're kicking off today's deep dive by exploring the Enneagram, and specifically, we're focusing on Type 7, the Enthusiast. Looks like you sent over a couple articles from The Spiritual Seek, huh? So I'm guessing you're pretty ready to dig into what makes these folks tick.
Definitely a great choice for a deep dive. You know, even if you don't think you're a seven yourself, understanding how they operate can be super helpful. Sevens, they're everywhere. Work, friends, just out and about. You're bound to bump into them.
For sure. And for anyone who needs a quick refresher, the Enneagram basically maps out 9 interconnected personality types, right?
Yep.
Each one's got its own unique set of motivations and fears.
Exactly.
Today, it's all about the enthusiast, so let's unpack that a little.
All right. So picture this. You've got that friend who's always buzzing around, tons of energy, always cooking up a new plan, or off on some adventure.
Yeah, I can think of a few.
Odds are that's a type 7. New experiences are their jam, and they bring this like contagious optimism to everything they do, which is pretty cool.
Both of the articles we got really hit on those core traits.
Yeah.
The high energy, being super optimistic, that spontaneous streak makes total sense why they're called the enthusiasts.
Yeah, it definitely fits. But there's also this like deeper layer to why they're always on the go. Sevens, they have this fear of being deprived or experiencing pain. That's a big motivator for them.
Interesting.
It is, right? So they're almost always searching for that next exciting thing, like it's a way to avoid anything negative.
So it's not just that they love fun, it's more like a deeper need to keep things positive, keep things stimulating.
You got it. And
Yeah.
that actually ties into their core desire, which is to feel satisfied, content, the catch. For a seven, that satisfaction, it's often fleeting.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, they're always on the lookout for the best experience, the ultimate activity. Makes it kind of tough to just settle down.
Okay, so we're seeing this pattern of always seeking, constantly moving forward. And one of the articles mentioned something that kind of stuck with me. It said sevens fall into the thinking center of the Enneagram, but not in the typical, like, brainy way. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
For sure. When we say thinking center, we're not necessarily talking about like bookworms or academics, but
Mm.
seven's thinking, it's more about anticipation, generating ideas really, really fast.
Okay.
Think of it like their mind's constantly 5 steps ahead, like a chess player sizing up every possible move.
Wow, that's intense.
It can be, right?
The article even gave that example of Devon, I think it was, the businesswoman who couldn't even enjoy a concert because her to-do list was running through her head.
Yeah, classic seven right there. They're processing, planning, anticipating, even when they're supposed to be chilling.
Makes you wonder if they ever actually experience the present moment.
That can be a real challenge for them, yeah.
Mm.
That whole fear of missing out, it can make it tough to appreciate what's right in front of them.
Speaking of challenges, let's switch gears a bit and talk about the strengths and weaknesses that come with being a Type 7. Both articles were pretty clear that sevens bring a lot of energy and positivity to the table, no matter the situation.
Absolutely. Fun-loving, captivating, the kind of people who light up a room when they walk in. And that energy often means they're super productive, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Brainstorming, launching projects, getting things moving. They excel at that stuff.
That Enneagram Type 7, the Enthusiast article from True You Journal, really drove that point home, like the positive influence they have on others.
It did. But it also pointed out that all that fast-paced energy can turn into a weakness, too. Sevens, they can really struggle with focus, following through on things, and setting boundaries. Saying no, that's a hard one for them because they don't want to miss out on anything.
I guess it's like being in an ice cream shop and wanting to try every single flavor.
Perfect analogy, but, that gotta-have-it-all attitude, it can lead to overcommitting, burning out. They spread themselves too thin, start a ton of projects, and then struggle to actually finish any of them.
So finding that balance, their natural enthusiasm, but also being grounded and following through, that seems like a key challenge for them.
You nailed it. And that's where it becomes really important to understand that whole spectrum of like a healthy seven versus an unhealthy seven. Helps us see how those core traits can show up in both positive and not so desirable ways.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about saying, like, all sevens are good or bad, but more about understanding how those traits can play out.
Okay.
So you've got your healthy seven, right? Someone who's learned to channel all that energy in a productive way. Still enthusiastic, still up for adventure, but they've developed the ability to, like, focus, prioritize, and actually see things through to the end.
So they're not just starting things, but finishing them too, which is something both articles really emphasized, right? As a key growth area for sevens. Totally. And they're finding joy not just in the new and shiny, but in the simple stuff too. Being present, appreciating what they've got.
That almost sounds like a paradox for a 7, right? Embracing simplicity when their whole nature is to crave variety.
It is a bit of a shift, no doubt, and takes real effort, but it's where they can find that real contentment. Then you've got the flip side. An unhealthy 7, they might get reckless, escapist even. That fear of missing out, the need for constant stimulation, it takes over.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they might make impulsive choices, get into addictive behaviors, all that.
So those positive traits, the energy, the optimism, in an unhealthy state, it's almost like they get distorted.
Exactly. They can become a way to avoid dealing with stuff, deeper issues.
Interesting.
Instead of facing challenges head on, it's like they distract themselves with constant activity or chase pleasure to numb out any negative feelings.
It's a reminder that even the good stuff, if it's not balanced, can have a shadow side, right?
For sure.
Both articles touched on this idea of a spectrum, healthy to unhealthy, and it seems like a really important point.
Absolutely. It's not just 7s either. We all have the capacity for growth and, well, getting stuck, regardless of our type. Knowing the spectrum helps us see where we might be tripping ourselves up, but also where we have the potential to grow.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit here, both articles talked about this idea of wings in the Enneagram system. Can you break that down for us? What's a wing and how does it apply to a type 7?
All right, so in the Enneagram, each type basically has 2 wings, which are the types that are right next to it on the Enneagram circle, the diagram. And these wings, they add these extra layers to a person's personality. Like, they influence the core type.
Okay, so for a 7, the wings would be, let me think, a 6 or an 8.
You got it. So picture a 7 with a 6 wing, right? Often they're called the entertainer. They might be a little more cautious, a little more loyal than a 7 with an 8 wing.
Makes sense.
They still have that 7 enthusiasm, but there's this added need for security, for responsibility.
Yeah, so maybe they're still drawn to new experiences, but they're also thinking about the risks or taking a little more time to plan things out.
Exactly, like they're double checking their parachute before jumping out of the plane.
I like that.
Then you've got your 7 with an 8 wing, sometimes called a realist. They tend to be more assertive, more ambitious.
Ah, interesting.
It's like they combine the 7's get up and go with the 8's drive and determination.
So they're not just dreaming up ideas, they're actually making them happen.
That's it. The 7's who are likely to be entrepreneurs, leaders, anyone who needs that combo of vision and action.
Wow, it's pretty cool how understanding someone's wing can add so much depth to how you see their personality.
It really does. You start to see how even people with the same core type can express themselves in totally different ways.
One thing that really stood out to me in both articles was how much they talked about the 7's fear of missing out. Seems like it's a pretty powerful force for them, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. It's like a core fear for 7's, and it can show up in so many ways. You'll notice a 7, they always have a plan, a backup plan, and a plan for when the backup plan fails. You know what I mean? That fear of missing out runs deep.
So it's not just about wanting to have fun, it's tied to this deeper worry about not experiencing like everything life has to offer.
You got it. And that makes it tough for them to settle down, commit to things, even just relax and enjoy the moment. They're always looking ahead, wondering, is there something better I'm missing out on?
I can see how that would play out in their work life, right? Maybe constantly switching jobs, taking on too much, having trouble prioritizing.
Oh, yeah. Super common for 7's. That FOMO, fear of missing out, it can make them jump from one thing to the next without really exploring any of them fully.
Okay.
And then in relationships, like we talked about earlier, it can make it hard to really commit, to be present with their partner. They might always be thinking, is there someone better out there? Or they have trouble with routines, long-term plans, because they're afraid of closing off options.
That makes sense. Like a part of them is always looking over their shoulder, wondering if the grass is greener somewhere else.
Exactly. And that can make it hard to build those strong, lasting relationships. They might start things with a ton of excitement, but then, poof, they lose interest or move on.
So this one fear, it can really touch every part of a 7's life, huh?
It can, and it's often something they need to work on, consciously as part of their personal growth. Both articles actually had some good tips for 7's who are trying to manage that fear and find more balance.
Yeah, and I was thinking, even if you're not a 7, some of that advice could be helpful, right? I mean, we all get that FOMO feeling sometimes, especially with how much is going on these days.
Totally. So some of the stuff they talked about, it's relevant for anyone who wants to be more present, more intentional. One thing they suggested was for 7's to slow down and try practicing mindfulness.
Okay.
Helps them become more aware of their thoughts, their feelings, without needing to constantly distract themselves.
So instead of rushing to the next thing, it's about learning to just pause, be in the moment.
Exactly. They also talked about getting a stronger sense of self-awareness, really understanding what drives them, their patterns, and those triggers that feed the FOMO.
So not just slowing down, but also figuring out the why behind their actions.
Exactly. Once they get that, they can start making choices about whether that behavior is actually helping them or not.
Mm.
Another big step they talked about is challenging those beliefs that drive the FOMO in the first place.
Okay.
Often sevens, they have this idea that they need to experience everything to be happy, fulfilled, and all that.
Sounds kind of exhausting to live like that, honestly.
It is, right.
Yeah.
And usually it's not even true. The articles encourage sevens to explore the idea that they can be happy, fulfilled, even if they miss out on some things. Letting go of that need to control everything, trusting that there's enough out there, even if they don't get to do it all.
Well, that seems like a big shift, but also a really freeing one once you get there.
Totally. It might take time, though, for sure. They also talked about cultivating gratitude for what they already have. Maybe keeping a gratitude journal, telling people they appreciate them, or just noticing the good stuff.
Sounds simple, but powerful too. Focusing on what you have instead of what you're missing.
Exactly. It can really help them shift away from that scarcity mindset and towards like abundance and appreciation. Both articles even had these lists of famous people who they think might be sevens as examples of how those traits can show up in the real world.
Yeah, I saw those. It was a pretty interesting mix. The Enneagram Type 7, the Enthusiasts article mentioned people like the Dalai Lama and Galilei, if you can believe it.
And the Enneagram Type 7, the Enthusiast article from True You Journal, they had names like Elton John and Robin Williams.
It's a good reminder that the Enneagram isn't about putting people into boxes, right? It's not saying everyone of a certain type is exactly the same.
Right. These are just examples, to show the different ways that seven energy can express itself. Someone might put that energy into spirituality, someone else into science, someone else into art.
And we should probably say, too, we don't actually know anyone's Enneagram type unless they've told us.
Yeah, good point. These lists are just speculation based on how people come across publicly.
So no labeling people based on what we think we know.
Definitely not. But even so, these examples can be helpful, just to show us how diverse seven traits can be.
Okay, so both articles also touched on the topic of sevens in relationships, which seems like it could be pretty interesting, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Their fear of missing out, their need for stimulation, it creates some unique dynamics. The Enneagram Type 7, the Enthusiast article from True You Journal, actually went into a lot of detail about this, both the good and the, well, challenging stuff.
Yeah, I remember. It said sevens can be really fun, enthusiastic partners, spontaneous, adventurous, always up for new things, but they can also struggle with commitment, consistency, and dealing with tough emotions.
Exactly. That fear of missing out might make them always want to try new things, even within the relationship. And they tend to avoid discomfort. So it can be hard to deal with conflict, work through tough times, all that.
So I'm guessing that can create tension with a partner who wants stability, emotional depth.
Oh, for sure. And the article gave some advice for both sevens and their partners about how to navigate that. For sevens, it's all about being more present, slowing down, learning to say no, and actually facing those uncomfortable emotions.
So it's like finding that balance, that desire for something new,
Yeah.
but also needing that depth and commitment in a relationship.
You got it. And for their partners, it was about patience, understanding, communicating clearly, setting boundaries, expressing their needs, and being supportive while their seven partner works on things.
So it's a two-way street. Both people need to be willing to meet in the middle and create something that works for both of them.
Absolutely. And relationships, they're a journey, not a destination, right? There's going to be ups and downs, challenges, good times. But with that commitment to growth and understanding, both partners can learn and evolve together.
One thing that stood out to me, it was the advice for partners of sevens to gently remind them that acknowledging pain, emotional pain, it won't kill them. Sounds simple, but I feel like it means a lot.
It really does, because sevens, they're so scared of negativity and pain, they avoid it at all costs. But that avoidance, it actually keeps them from experiencing real intimacy, real connection.
So it's about helping them see that those difficult emotions, they're okay, they're a part of life, you don't have to run from them.
Exactly. Creating that safe space where they can express those feelings, work through them, that's key for a strong relationship. The article also briefly mentions seven compatibility with other Enneagram types.
Right, it said sevens usually have good synergy with fives and eights, the other types in the thinking center.
Yeah, But it also stressed that any two types can make it work as long as both people are committed to understanding and respecting each other's differences.
Makes sense.
Recognizing each type has its own strengths, its own challenges, and those differences can actually complement each other in a relationship.
That's a good reminder. The Enneagram isn't about finding the perfect match. It's about understanding how different personalities work together and grow together.
Totally. And that understanding can add so much depth and richness to any relationship.
Yeah, it really sounds like the Enneagram can be so useful for relationships, not just for sevens, but for anyone who wants to get their partner.
Mm.
Like what makes them tick?
Oh, absolutely. It gives you this framework for communication and empathy, and that's crucial for any healthy relationship.
So as we start to wrap up our deep dive into type 7, I want to circle back to that whole fear of missing out thing. You said earlier it kind of shows up differently depending on like what area of life we're talking about.
Right.
Can you give us some specific examples of how that might look?
Yeah, for sure. So let's say we're talking about work, right? A seven's FOMO, it might look like constantly switching jobs or always feeling like they need to be on the lookout for something better, maybe even having trouble sticking with one career path.
So like they're the person who's always sending out applications, even if they have a pretty good job already.
Exactly. Or they might be the one who volunteers for every new project, even if they're already swamped.
I see.
They just have this drive, this fear of being left behind or missing out on something exciting.
And in relationships, like we talked about, it can make it hard to commit or be present with their partner.
Yeah, for sure. They might be wondering if there's someone more exciting, more fulfilling out there. Or maybe they have trouble with routine long-term plans because they're scared of limiting their options.
It sounds like it can really get in the way of experiencing true intimacy, real connection.
It definitely can. And often it's something they need to work on if they want to build those lasting relationships.
So what about personal growth? How might FOMO affect their journey there?
That's a really interesting question. I think it could look like jumping from one self-improvement trend to the next, never really sticking with one long enough to see any results, always chasing the newest book, the latest workshop.
Instead of going deep with one thing, they're skimming the surface of a bunch of things.
Exactly. And that can really keep them from experiencing the depth, the real transformation that comes from sticking with something.
Well, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive into the world of the Enneagram Type 7. We've covered so much.
We have. We've explored their core motivations, their fears, their strengths and challenges, and how all of that plays out in their lives.
And we talked about some practical tips for growth, not just for sevens, but for anyone who wants to understand them better.
Remember, the Enneagram is a tool, right, for self-awareness and for understanding the people around us. It's a journey, and the more we learn, the more we can grow, both as individuals and in our relationships.
So we encourage you all to keep exploring the Enneagram. Think about how this knowledge can help you interact with the sevens in your life. And maybe consider how understanding your own Enneagram type can help you move through the world with more intention.
And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, anything you want to share. Until next time, keep diving deep.